to another episode of Inspiring Generations. I'm your host, Celeste Williams. It's been a while since I've talked to you guys. I'm here in studio with Miss Judith Garcia today. She is City Councilwoman for District 5, which is the district I live in, so it was befitting for me to have her as a guest today. She's also City Council Vice President. So, you know, I've been admiring her for about 6 years now, and she came into our community like a fireball. And I just been following her and inspired by her, and I just wanted to have her on today so you guys can see how much she's grown, and I've been watching her grow as well. So I want you to welcome today Miss Judith Garcia to Inspiring Generations. Hi, Judith.
Hi, thank you so much for having me here. It's such an honor to actually get an opportunity to sit with you. I know that you're always outside in the community, planting, cleaning our streets, and being so active. So it's lovely to actually take a moment to sit down and have a heart-to-heart conversation. So thank you for inviting me.
It's definitely a pleasure to have you here, because you're busy as well. And I think for the most part, when we have met in the community, always something going on, right? Like you said, whether it's planting, whether it's the food distribution because of COVID. You know, I know you guys have had to regroup and, make sure the community was okay and trying to heal from it too at the same time. So we have a lot on our plate in Chelsea, right? But what inspired me is, like I just said to my audience, is when I met you. I think I was talking to some Cambodian people on my street.
Yeah, it's right across from your street. I know exactly where they live. They live right next to the KM Park.
And I was like, what is this young lady doing? Why is she going around talking to people? And you know, I was not aware. To be truthful, I had just maybe 4 years prior moved back into the community. Mm-hmm. And it was my first time living on this side of Chelsea, which is District 5. We're talking Walnut Street and Chestnut Street. And so when I first came, it was a hot mess. It was a hot mess. I didn't know who was responsible for, this is before I met you now. I didn't know who was responsible for that district. Neither did I care. Mm-hmm. Does that seem wrong to say?
No, I think it's a sentiment that is shared by some residents, right? We have such hectic lives. We live in a community that people are just hardworking. They're so focused with just putting food on the table and working multiple jobs. And this pandemic was a clear reflection of that, right? We have families that are grouped together, living in 2-3 bedroom apartments, rents that are so high. They're dealing with day-to-day issues. So really taking the time to stop and figure out who represents you at local government is not your top priority. Your top priority is making sure that your children are fed, making sure that they're going to good schools, making sure that they are involved with the right people, that they're going to church on Sundays. So it's not, you're not an outlier. Right. by saying that. It's a sentiment that is shared by many people, and it's our job as public officials who want to represent all of our constituency. It's our job to go and knock on those doors and to really explain to people what our role is. You know, I will say my mom, I'm a proud daughter of a single mother. Yes. Who came to Chelsea back in the late 80s. And she didn't know anything about civil service. She came from a country where, you know, nonprofits did not exist. She came from a country where being politically involved was something that she wanted to obviously stay away from. But eventually, you know, there were some leaders and you know, leaders that Gladys Vega, for example, Juan Vega, that were paving that way, where they came to her and explained, ma'am, you have the power to make decisions that can help better your life.
Yeah.
You can get involved in civic process. You can get involved in City Hall. City Hall is supposed to work for you. And it's the power of those leaders. It's the power of activists. It's the power of volunteers, of good neighbors.
Yes.
You know, you do a lot of this work, right? You go out there and you make Chelsea
For
a better
long
place.
time.
For a really long time. You've helped
Since
with
I was young,
our
Since I
senior
was like
center.
17, 18, I've always been interested in what was going on with my neighbors and the elderly in my community.
Yeah.
And I've lived on every 3 parts of Chelsea.
You have.
From the middle Orange Street to the Mace projects, which was infested with gangs when I moved there, but 12 years later, we didn't have any of that, so you can make change.
You can, and
Which
it's
is
the power
true.
of communication, right? And that's, we sometimes forget that it's so necessary to go back to basics, to talk to people, to communicate civilly, and we can make just so much change, and that's what when I decided to run when I was 23.
I met you when you were 23 years old.
23.
And look at me. I always tell my guests who are young, I'm like, yeah, and I thought you were like 16. And I was like, why is she running for 23? So you were, well, when I say well-baked, that means that you had did what you needed to do to get to that next level, you know? So you cooked very well.
I did.
Yeah, you cooked very well.
I tried. I was raised by, I want to say I was raised by a village.
Yeah.
You know, my mom raised me as best she could in her home, but it was those that surrounded me, those mentors, people that supported me, that really helped me bring this campaign to fruition. And saying that I did this alone is not true.
You would never do
not
that,
true.
though.
Yeah.
You don't look like that kind of girl that would do something like that. You've been pretty honest. You've knocked on my door plenty of times. You know, I never look at what people have. If they have more than me, kudos to you. I mean, material-wise. And I don't live in the big fancy house. You know, I don't have a green backyard where I can plant my own food, which I would love someday. But I don't have any of those things. But there's such a big field of things that are blooming outside my home. And I can say, oh, poor me. I live in low income. There's nothing I can do. You know, I can't engage. You know, I can make my conditions be a part of not getting up and doing anything. You know, and I would never encourage anybody to sit down and do nothing. And so, like I said, when I met you, you came into this, you know, area that was infested with drugs, still, because your background, you grew up seeing that. You grew up with gangs, you know, you grew up seeing the worst of what Chelsea can be at that time. And that was in the 80s. And your mom's coming here from Honduras in that time, right? So, soy hondureña.
Yeah, I was actually born here. I was born in Cambridge.
Okay.
But I was raised my entire life in Chelsea. But
Okay.
it was right at that time, ironically, it was right at that time when our city was in receivership, where our schools were no longer ours, right? And I'm a baby, I'm a product of that. But what's beautiful is that all these years later, I believe I graduated. So I graduated in 2009 from Chelsea High School, which was the year that we ended our partnership with Boston University.
Yeah.
And also now it's our charter review was actually this year, and I had the opportunity to chair that. And for me, that was such a symbolic moment because I had the opportunity to work hand in hand with some of my colleagues from council, but also colleagues from the school committee, but most importantly, Chelsea residents.
Right.
And
Yeah.
that was meaningful to me because I am a baby of receivership. I experienced that.
you are.
And all of a sudden, I am chairing the committee that's reviewing our city charter, which is our most...
That's like a wow moment.
It's one of our most important documents, the most important document of our city. So having that opportunity to really work collectively in that process meant a lot, because we've come a long way. We've come a long way.
And then when you came with the force of, I am running for city council, you know, my name, I was like, what's your name? You're like, my name is Judith Garcia. You know, talk to your neighbors. And I'm like, Judith, you know, I only talk to a few of these people around here, because a lot of them you could not communicate with that all on a level of knowing. Like I said, they were in the space where I was, where I didn't care who was representing our district, you know? And now I know how important that is. Now I get it. You know what I mean? I truly get it.
And you know what's curious? I will say this. What I found was, and I found this out throughout the years, it's not that people don't care. It's that no one has ever asked before. And
that's a good one.
When you do ask, they do tell you.
Yeah.
And I can tell you, as I door knocked, I kept hearing lots of common ground. And you might be from a different culture, you might be from a different religion, you might be a different color of skin, your life experience might be so different, but I found so many reoccurring themes, so many issues that are very similar, right? People want cleaner streets, people want safer neighborhoods, people want better schools, people want cities where there's no crime, people want people want jobs, people want to live in beautiful homes, they want their quality of life to improve. They're not asking for miracles. Right? They're asking for sustainable change, but no one has bothered to ask.
Give them the outlet, give them opportunities, you know, to engage, right? And that's what I found that inspired me, is that there were people like yourself that said, hey, you're older, you know, you're my senior, but you still can get involved with this process. And so now we're 6 years later, right? What do you feel, or how much, can I word it in a ways, how much do you think you accomplished in the last 6 years of being on the city council?
That is such a powerful question, because there is so much, right, that has been accomplished in our city in terms of economic development, in terms of improving our infrastructure, in terms of providing opportunities to our youth, in terms of really communicating and listening to our residents, to what they want, right? Have we made mistakes? Absolutely.
Of course.
Absolutely, because there's no manual to lead and move a city forward. And I like to believe that every time we make a decision, any decision you make, the universe divides itself, right?
Of course, yes.
Because if you make one decision, you're going one way and you might not be going another. So that happens constantly in any leadership position, right? But if I were to, it's really difficult to pinpoint, right, what we've done. I would hate to sit here and do a laundry list of everything that we've accomplished, but I can say that one of the things I'm most proud of in my 6 years, again, I started at 23, I'm turning 30.
Yeah, this is what you can talk
I've spent my 20s as a city councilwoman.
Yes, you have, honey.
But the most proud moment as a city councilwoman in this city, and trust me, there's been a lot of things that have happened, but this pandemic, what made this pandemic powerful, I see it as a blessing in disguise. Because as hard as it hit our community, as hard as that was for all of us, it really showed how resilient this community is, and how the council and me as the vice president of city council, I am just a small tool in comparison to the power of the collective of the city. Of the city.
Yeah, the city itself.
Of the city. You know, this is one of the most resilient communities. And there
I believe that.
Two things could have happened, right? We would have either just failed miserably, or where we are now.
You would prevail.
We prevailed.
Yes.
We were like that lotus flower, right? The lotus flower grows in muddy, murky waters, but it blooms beautifully.
It sounds like a poem from my flower diaries. Have you been reading my book?
I have not been reading it.
Honest to God, you that's a great metaphor.
When I think of Chelsea,
yeah.
that's what I think of.
Yeah.
I think of that beautiful
Yeah.
lotus flower that grows from murky waters. Did we have challenges? Absolutely.
Yes.
But we overcame, we were innovative, and we
Yes.
did it together. And the council was just one piece of that puzzle, and that greater resolution was made through all of us, through our faith leaders
Yes.
that kept this community grounded.
Yes, they have.
Through our volunteers
that.
who said, yes, I might be putting my life at risk, but I'm going to go and I'm going to serve at that food pantry. You know, I remember days when we were carrying heavy boxes, like some boxes were like 50 pounds, and people, yes, you have been there, you know.
Because your colleague, to go on to another area, Monica, Paulina, Monica, I volunteered for you. And yes, Judith is correct. Those boxes were
heavy. They were very heavy.
You know, and that's your colleague at the T&D, right?
Yes,
Monica, right?
Yes, Monica. Big shout out to Monica and all our staff at the Neighborhood Developers, which is another organization that created a hotline to like respond and help with this process, and that can-do attitude from our civic leaders, from our nonprofits, CAPIC, the neighborhood developers, so many that I may be missing, La Colaborativa, Connect, you know, just so many. Community Connections, another great organization. Just everyone came together, and I think that is the power, that constant communication. And, you know, where I see myself, you know, playing a role in that was going back to a fundamental skill that I have and I will continue to carry with me, which is to listen. It's, as politicians, we don't have the answers to everything. And I remember during that pandemic, I would get on the phone and I would say to folks, well, what do you think we need? What do you think we should be doing? I remember talking to Mimi, an excellent employee from City Hall, and talking to Father Edgar Gutierrez, who said to me, Judith, you know, we anticipate that a lot of these families that are dying from COVID are not going to be able to pay the funeral expenses. So I remember getting on the phone and saying, well, what do you think we should do?
Exactly.
And the idea just came of, let's create a fund. You know, let's create a fund for families who might not have the money. This is an expense you're not thinking of. You know, a lot of people got laid off, lost their jobs, and now having to pay for someone's funeral expense while you're trying to grieve. So that's how the fund came along. You know, that's one example. Another example was, I remember one day, Fidel Maltese, another amazing employee.
Shout out. Listen and shout out
so many
to
shout outs.
Padre Edgar,
Mimi
Graney, who has been here on Inspiring Generations, and Fidel Matez. Because Fidel, you are amazing.
Yes, he called me one day and he's like, Judith, mother, and mind you, it was chaos, it was the peak of the pandemic, and he calls me and he's like, Judith, Mother's Day is coming up, and we have all these moms at a hotel. You know, the city, we had paid a hotel for many of these patients to stay at because they couldn't quarantine at home. And he's like, you know, do you know if there's anything we can do? And I remember
I was into action.
I was like, yes. I was walking down Carter Street, Carter Hill, and I said, let me think of something. And immediately I start calling local businesses. Can we prepare breakfast? Can we do something special for these moms who were making the ultimate sacrifice, right? They were choosing to leave their families and quarantine at a hotel to keep them safe.
That's a tall order.
Yeah, so, you know, that to me, our response in a moment of crisis. And being able to somewhat compartmentalize our emotions, right? To respond to a need and to almost be robotic on it, right?
Exactly.
That to me was powerful.
That's exactly what you have to do.
And that's what government should be. You know, government should be a space where we don't act like we know it all, that we don't act like we're better than.
What's going on in each environment, right?
In the ground. What's going on
right
the ground.
Right on the front lines.
Exactly.
Yes, I think that you guys have weathered a very crucial storm. The storm of COVID was
For everyone.
for everyone. Tú no solamente, todo. Everybody was infected by this, no matter, like you said, no matter your background, your ethnicity, your financial status. Everyone felt the storm of COVID. And many people have passed on, like Judith said, and couldn't afford to pay for the funeral, more or less, to put food on the table. So there's a lot of things to deal with. I have said that before in Inspiring Justin, that we are a resilient city. And it's funny that Judith is here today. She makes me laugh. She makes me smile. If you can see behind my mask, she makes me smile. During your travels, doing my research, there's one thing that I love that you took away from your travels. You brought back all the information that you collected. And you stayed here. I know so many young people that have become successful and they're like, I'm out of this town, I'm not, you know what I mean? Because they never felt it had a good reputation. To say you're from Chelsea is to, oh, I'm ashamed, I'm from Chelsea. You know what I mean? And that's the attitude before I met you that I was getting from some young people. Is like, when I get successful, I'm out of here. But you stayed. What made you stay?
It's a great question. So I will say this. I will say that when so Chelsea does face a lot of retention issues, especially with our youth. And when I have these particular conversations with youth, I do hear that a lot. The youth plight, right? They just want to leave. They don't want this life anymore. When I ask them why, and they say, well, because I want to go somewhere else and have impact and live a life of impact and live a life of change and have something to contribute. And my comeback to that is, well, why not do it in a community like Chelsea where the satisfaction of seeing change happen will be greater than you going to San Francisco or you going to Austin, Texas. So I chose to stay because, first of all, this was the community that raised me. This was the community that made me and shaped me and molded me to the way I am. And let me tell you, I have been to some privileged nations. I have been in some privileged
I've seen your travels,
situations. Girl. And let me tell you, some of these folks I sit next to that are very privileged, they could never handle the most minute issue.
Yeah.
And in my mind,
totally.
And in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, honey, I grew up in Chelsea. That's a stroll in the park for me.
Right.
And it's made me such an efficient leader in everything I do. So why not come back?
I'm giving that to you because I live in your district. Like I said, I live in District 5. And District 5, before I met Judith, was a hot mess. But now I can sit across from Judith, which I'm doing right now, I have the pleasure of doing, and speaking about the progress that has been made in that community because I have seen it. It would be different if I didn't live in that district and I had her on and I didn't live in a NEO's district and knows what goes on where NEO's city council. Shout out to NEO. I love him. Sometimes, I'm like, hey, I want to go on that side of town now. But I appreciate, I really do. I appreciate the hard work that you've put in and that you continue to put in. You've helped us fight for, the city to be better, and you stayed here in the trenches. And nothing more for me that I admire a woman that doesn't mind getting her hands dirty.
Yeah.
Okay? I love it. I love it. And I ask all my guests this. Is there anything you can say to our youth out there that will inspire them to stay and stay engaged because you've heard her journey. You know, she has been there since she was a little girl. She's been there. She has knowledge of what it can become if you don't stand up and make changes. So that's why the advice that she's going to give you now, young people, older people, because we're never too old to learn, and I'll always say that on this platform. I love watching the young people grow. I wish that most of you that become successful stay. But right now I'm going to give Judith the platform so she can give you some words of inspiration.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you so much for having me here. And to all the youth that are watching now, I will say that I strongly believe that your journey right now, as you're watching this, you might not know what you want to do with your life. You might be in high school and maybe sitting down wondering what school you're going to apply to or what vocation you're going to seek, because you might not want to go to school and you might not have all the answers. And trust me, I may seem cool and collected and I am a leader in this community, but sometimes I don't have those answers. And it's so important for you to surround yourself with people who are positive, who will advise you and guide you in the good path. And explore. You know, your trajectory will never be linear. It will always have its corners and there will be some hills that you'll have to go by. But just remember that no matter what you're facing right now, no matter how high that mountain is that you're climbing, that experience in itself will mold you to become a better person. So stick by with people who have nothing but good vibes to offer in your life, and really find the wisdom to evolve from friendships that not might be the best for you. Find the right path for you, explore. There's no right or wrong answer. Try new things. And I really hope that you choose to stay in Chelsea, return to Chelsea. It's never too late to make this community a better place. And what a great reward it is to come back here and see the product of your work happen, and with that improve the future generations that will make Chelsea their home. So I hope you can continue to join us in this path forward to make our community a better place. And I hope that you continue to make Chelsea your home, and remember that I don't know what is that guidance and pillar in your life, but for me it's God. And if you center yourself, either that being God, in the universe, in some spiritual being, or whatever that drive is, but just stay grounded to it. And I wish you all the best.
Thank you, Judith, for those words of inspiration. So young people, stay in Chelsea. Be proud of where you live. And Judith's advice holds true for me. I would just like to know that you all are doing well, and you're starting to heal and get back to your studies, and just continue to be great, because great seeds that are planted now will grow later on to bloom to be beautiful flowers.
Amen.
And that's what I truly believe. So great minds think alike. You know how that goes, right? So I want to welcome you with open arms to engage in this community. It's so many things to do. Me as an elder, I've found like so many outlets, to get engaged and to feel like I'm not alone, to feel like I'm not isolated. There's always something to do. But on that note, thank you for watching Inspiring Generations, and I'll see you back on the next episode.